Welcome back to Storytime with Sean. These shady business people got an epic dose of karma. Story 1 from Her Revenge is titled, The HOA President's Long Goodbye. Posting this on behalf of a friend who isn't on Reddit. This is for you, Jake. When I moved into my suburban neighborhood, I expected peace and quiet. Instead, I walked into a petty dictatorship run by our HOA president, Todd. Todd was the worst kind of leader. The kind who loved power but hated accountability. He enforced ridiculous rules like fining people $200 for leaving their trash cans out 1 minute past 9 a.m., but blatantly ignoring the rules when they suited him. His own yard was a mess of unpermitted structures, and his fence was taller than the allowed city ordinances. But Todd's true sin? Using the HOA as his personal piggy bank. At first, I tried reasoning with him. My fence was slightly off color because the approved stain wasn't available, and he fined me $500. I explained, provided receipts, and asked for leniency. Todd smirked and said, "Rules are rules," and walked away. That's when I decided I would take him down. Not with screaming or public arguments, but methodically, legally, and in a way he would never recover from. Step 1. Become the inside man. Todd's first mistake was underestimating me. I volunteered for the HOA board under the guise of wanting to get involved in the community. I played the part of the eager, naive newbie perfectly. For 2 years, I attended every meeting, quietly observing how Todd operated. I learned he controlled the board by irritating other members and burying them in paperwork. He'd push through votes when only his allies were present and conveniently lose paperwork submitted by dissenting homeowners. I kept my head down, took detailed notes, and waited. My goal was to outlast his term as president so I could begin making changes. Then I discovered Todd's second mistake. He wasn't just a bother, he was a thief. Step 2. Follow the money. Todd loved to brag about how he kept the HOA's finances in order, but something didn't add up. The annual fees were high, much higher than in similar neighborhoods, but the common areas were falling apart. The pool was closed half the summer for maintenance issues, and the landscaping looked like it hadn't been touched in months. I started digging. As the HOA treasurer, Todd had access to all the accounts, but he was notoriously cagey about sharing financial details. I asked him for the budget during a meeting, and Todd laughed it off, saying, "Don't worry, I've got it under control." I filed a formal request for the financial records, which under HOA rules, he was required to provide. Weeks went by with no response. That's when I started talking to neighbors. Turns out, I wasn't the only one suspicious. Over a dozen homeowners had requested access to the budget over the years, only to be ignored. One neighbor claimed Todd had used HOA funds to install a new patio at his house, while another swore they'd seen Todd's kids at the community pool during its maintenance closure. Armed with these suspicions, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, forcing Todd to provide the record. He stalled, but I wasn't backing down. When Todd finally handed over the financial records, they were a mess. Invoices were missing, payments were mislabeled, and some expenses were downright bizarre. A $15,000 landscaping fee to a company that didn't exist. Thousands spent on administrative costs with no explanation. I cross-referenced the HOA's bank statements with public records and found the smoking gun. Todd was funneling money to his personal accounts. Even better, I discovered Todd had been inflating contractor fees, pocketing the difference, and splitting the profits with his buddy, a shady contractor who handled most of the HOA's maintenance. I compiled everything into a detailed report, complete with spreadsheets, photos, and notarized statements from neighbors who had seen Todd's antics firsthand. Step 4. The coup. I waited for the annual HOA meeting, which was typically a snooze fest, attended by only a handful of homeowners. But this time, I made sure people showed up. I spent weeks knocking on doors, explaining what Todd had been up to. I didn't share everything, just enough to get people angry and curious. On the night of the meeting, the room was packed. Todd started the meeting like usual, droning on about how difficult it was to manage the HOA and how much he'd sacrificed for the community. That's when I stood up. I calmly asked if he could explain some discrepancies in the budget. Todd laughed nervously and says, "I don't think this is the place or time." I replied, "Actually, Todd, it's the perfect time." I handed out copies of my report to everyone in the room. The mood shifted instantly. People started reading, whispering, then shouting. Todd tried to regain control, but it was too late. I called for a vote to remove him as president. By the end of the night, Todd was out. Step 5, the final blow. After Todd was removed, we hired an independent auditor to go through the HOA's finances. They confirmed everything. Todd had embezzled over $50,000, mismanaged tens of thousands more, and committed multiple counts of fraud. We reported him to the police and filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. But it didn't end there. Todd's shady contractor buddy was also exposed and banned from doing business in the county. Todd had to sell his house to pay restitution and legal fees. His name became a running joke in the neighborhood, and no one would touch him professionally. With Todd gone, we restructured the HOA to prevent another dictator from taking over. We implemented term limits, required multiple board members to approve financial decisions, and created an online portal so all homeowners could access budgets and minute meetings. The aftermath. Every time I walk past Todd's old house, now owned by a lovely family, I smile. The pool is open, the landscaping is beautiful, and the HOA fees are lower than ever. Meanwhile, Todd moved to a neighboring town, where he reportedly tried to join another HOA board, only to be laughed out of the room when someone Googled his name. Justice wasn't just served, it was plated, garnished, and savored. Whoever came up with the saying "crime doesn't pay" must not have been talking about restitution. On to story 2. This one is also pro-revenge. This story is titled, "Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him." I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country in nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month, and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation, and the main door was locked with just a padlock. Not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road. On the same day, I got the gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later, and I didn't bother answering, but through my window, I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already, I wasn't digging the neighborhood, but I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house, so my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom, and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbor's water pump going. Now this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house. The first being the lowest and the one he lived in, the other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot tall guy with 3 dogs. No way he was going to do anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump the water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and was immediately suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited until his pump turned off, and then I turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious. But if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years. The house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks, so it was chalked up to that. Even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks, now it was starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd saved the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find exactly where he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. Even with washing 3 animals, a car every other week, and watering my garden only cost about $5 a month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it, and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off the water from my mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited until the pump flickered on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to the point at which the valve closes and shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for was that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly draining power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s era wiring. Around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, along with the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power would not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants on the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in the court if the person thinks they were unfairly penalized, and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income. He's a retired mechanic and has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me why I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe, and I turned it off until the next day, until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face, he kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh, okay," and went back inside. I'm not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care, because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the butt by simply flicking a tap off. Two birds, one stone, I'd say. TLDR, bought an abandoned house, neighbor was siphoning off water from my supply. Turned off my water supply when the motor was running. Motor burned out the wiring in the house and cut off water and power to him and his tenants. Tenants lodged police complaints and the landlord got fined, is now destitute and forced to move in with his daughter. So now we know why the guy was mad that somebody bought the house and moved in. His hustle was coming to an end. I wonder what kind of person you have to be to literally steal like that and then get an attitude that you're caught. Karma hit him hard. I don't know if that was a boomerang or what. That might have been a boomerang, a football thrown by Patrick Mahomes, and a fastball from Otani. I don't know. It was a big one. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I figured I'd try pro revenge for a little bit because it's hard to find entitled people that are just perfect enough for an episode. If you do, as usual, keep clicking like, sharing, and subscribing. You make my day when you do any of those things. We're going to, of course, have more episodes in the future. This is too much fun anyway. So we will see you next time. By now, YouTube might be showing you some other options for some of our other work. We've got our playlist, Old Banner Days from when we first started. We've got some entitled people. We've got pro revenge. We've got petty revenge and malicious compliance. We've got a whole plate of stuff to play with. So stay a while. We will see you next time at Storytime with Sean. Have a great day.